Hi, my name is Yana Wells, and I am a biochemistry undergrad at the University of Texas at El Paso. Lately, I've been really interested in human clones and genetic cloning. The first instance of genetic cloning that really shook the world occurred in agriculture, where we used genetic cloning technologies to create GMOs, or genetically modified organisms. And the FDA actually approved the first GMO product for consumers in 1982, opening the door to the commercialized use of cloning technologies. This was the first step. Only 14 years later, in 1996, the first animal was cloned from an adult somatic cell using nuclear transfer. She was a sheep, and her name was Dolly. Now, the cloning of animals is commercially available in Texas. You can get your pet cat cloned for $25,000, and you can get your pet dog cloned for $50,000. Seeing as animal cloning is now available to the public, it is only a matter of time until we start cloning humans. This begs the question, is it okay to clone humans? In order to answer this, we must consider a few things: the pros and cons, some cultural influences, some religious values, political representation, and ethical concerns. So, pros and cons. First, let's consider some positive points. One big pro is in the case of infertility. For instance, if someone is infertile for some reason or in a same-sex relationship, they can still have children using genetic cloning technologies. Another notable area where cloning could have a positive influence is in medicine. For instance, consider organ replacement scenarios. Human cloning could ensure that you have an identical copy of your own organs on hand at any time. Another positive factor for cloning lies in genetic research. Human clones would actually open the door to a whole new realm of experimentation. For instance, consider the possibilities that scientists would have with gene editing and human gene editing. Creating clones could also help us enhance human development. We could be able to genetically alter our code so as to prevent genetic or hereditary illnesses in our offspring. Now let's look at some negative points. One significant aspect of human cloning that sparks controversy is the prospect of designer babies. The practice of tampering with genetics to produce perfect children is eerily similar to the practices of eugenics, which most people regard as unsettling. Designer babies could also result in the discriminatory behavior in between designed individuals and naturally produced individuals. Another thing that we should really consider that could turn out potentially negatively are the human rights of clones. One such philosophical right that we could be violating by producing human clones is a person's right to an exclusive and individual identity. To say nothing of more basic rights like citizenship or healthcare. Rights like these could produce a psychological distress for the clones and for society as well. There is also some evidence that points towards the fact that clones age more rapidly than naturally produced individuals. A study carried out in Japan in 2002 observed mice that were cloned using the same techniques that were used to create Dolly, the cloned sheep. These mice were observed over a long period of time, and it was noticed that the mice that were cloned all died significantly earlier deaths than the non-cloned mice. Dolly herself was euthanized at 5 years of age due to deteriorating health, but it has not been confirmed whether or not her death was related to the fact that she was a clone. Now let's talk about the culture surrounding clones. When we think about the motivations for cloning, the first thing that usually comes to mind is scientific advancement. But what about the cultural influences that live in the media? Many people have often thought to themselves that sci fi literature can be prophetic. But what if instead these advanced technologies depicted in sci fi literatures actually inspired scientific advancements in real life? When you think about it this way, it becomes possible that the depiction of human clones in literature and media has actually been one of the main motivators for creating clones in real life, as opposed to any scientific motivators. Although human clones were very well received when they were depicted in literature, the same cannot necessarily be said for real life. In 1998, American researcher Richard Seed made the announcement that he intended to create the first human clone. This announcement was made public in multiple national newspapers and was produced a negative reaction in readers worldwide. The general public rejected the idea of human cloning in real life. Now let's turn our attention to the political representation of cloning. Biotechnology, which encapsulates cloning, is one of the fastest growing and most controversial areas of scientific innovation and technology. Because of this, cloning has appeared in political debates multiple times. In 2001, the House of Representatives voted to ban cloning with the Human Cloning Prohibition Act. Despite having the president's backing, who was George Bush at the time, this act did not come to be, and there are currently no federal laws that ban cloning in the US. Because of the rise of the bureaucratic state as the authority in matters of cloning, the jurisdiction over the debate shifted from scientists to biochemists. This resulted in a shift of focus from the human genetic engineering concerns about the means for achieving assumed ends to the ends themselves, namely the goals that biochemists wish to accomplish by pursuing cloning. This shift actually helped create a more positive representation of cloning and human cloning in the realm of politics. Religion has always been a strong driving force in the way that people and societies express themselves, so it is important to consider how cloning coincides with religious values. The Catholic Church has become one of the leading authorities against cloning because cloning violates the dignity of the embryo, which is seen as a gift from God. Islamic scholars are also firmly against human cloning, but not so much because of their concerns about the embryo, but rather because they worry about the impact that cloning may have on interhuman and familial relationships. In Judaism, the sentiment towards cloning is not very strong either way. However, in the Torah, Jews have the obligation to seek knowledge, and scientific knowledge is held in high regard. Because of this, Judaism regards human cloning as potentially a means to accomplish good. Buddhist practices and values are also undisturbed by human cloning. Buddhists believe that the creation of life is not a fixed or unequivocal process, and therefore life can begin in many ways. Buddhists also believe that human individuality is an illusion or mirage, and therefore would not threaten or devalue the personality of a character or individual. Now let's consider some ethical concerns. One of the dominant ethical concerns of human cloning revolves around designer babies, which I mentioned earlier, and human enhancement. This is because of the discriminatory behavior that would arise as a result. For instance, would genetically enhanced individuals be favored over individuals who are not? Designer babies would be capable of functioning at a higher capacity and would be more desirable to a range of marketable fields. Despite any amount of effort applied by non-enhanced individuals, designer babies would likely experience more opportunities in life. This would result in a whole new type of discrimination, genetic discrimination. Another ethical concern reads similar to the concerns revolving around abortion, and this regards the dignity of the embryo. For instance, just as the life of an unborn embryo should not be ended, the embryo should not be genetically tampered with either. Something else that I mentioned earlier that warrants consideration are the human rights of the clone. Would the identity of the clone be violated by virtue of being a clone? Would they be considered citizens? What sort of laws would we need to employ in order to ensure the moral and ethical treatment of clones as individuals rather than objects? We must also take into account those who produce the clones. Who would have the right to create clones? Would human clones become commercially available to the public? Could we create a market for human clones? Could one obtain the rights to create clones, or would rights such as these be strictly regulated by the government? The rights of the clones and those who make the clones must be promptly addressed when clones come into being. In conclusion, it cannot be objectively stated whether or not cloning humans is okay. Though the majority of the general public opposes the idea of cloning humans, there are undeniable benefits of cloning that are not limited to scientific advancement. Though we cannot make a clear argument for or against human cloning, it can be agreed that cloning humans is most likely the next step in human evolution, and therefore human clones are likely inevitable. So, considering this, it is our motivations for cloning and our response to the existence of clones in the future that will be the factors deciding whether or not cloning humans is okay. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.